Your thumb hovers over a message right now. 3 dots appear. Someone on the other side of the planet is typing back to you, and you feel nothing, no wonder, no fear, just mild impatience if it takes more than 10 seconds. That flatness in your chest, that boredom with something instant and global, is the strangest part of your entire day, and you don't even notice it happening. Now, strip it away. No towers, no satellites, no glowing rectangle. You're standing at the edge of a valley 60,000 years ago, and you need to tell someone 2 ridgelines over that danger is coming. You have your voice, your legs, and whatever you can burn. That's it. That's the entire information network of the human species for most of its existence. And somehow, across that silence, news still moved. Marriages got arranged between groups who never met face to face. Warnings crossed mountain ranges faster than the threat itself. And directions to water sources traveled thousands of kilometers through nothing but memory. The question that should be bothering you right now isn't whether they managed it. It's how a species with no writing, no wires, and no shared symbols built something that functioned like a network at all. Here's the scale that should unsettle you. Homo sapiens have been passing information hand to hand, voice to voice, for roughly 200,000 years. Writing, the thing you assume is the foundation of all long-distance communication, is maybe 5,000 years old. That means for over 97% of our story as a species, every warning, every map, every piece of news about where the herds moved or which river flooded traveled without a single written word. And it wasn't primitive. It wasn't guesswork passed along and hopelessly distorted like a game of telephone. Some of these systems were precise enough to guide someone across a landscape they'd never personally seen, using nothing but sound. Your own ancestors' survival, literally your bloodline's continuation, depended on information systems this reliable. Or none of us would be here to talk about texting. So let's take this apart properly, because the answer isn't one clever trick. It's a stack of at least 5 separate technologies, layered on top of each other, each solving a different distance problem. And by the time you reach the strangest one, you'll understand why sending a message used to mean something closer to performing a ritual than sending a signal. Start with the fastest layer, because speed mattered most when danger was close. Fire and smoke. A column of smoke rising from a hilltop can be seen for many kilometers in open country. And multiple indigenous groups across North America and Australia used variations of smoke signaling different puffs, different rhythms of covering and releasing the fire to code different messages. This wasn't a bonfire lit in panic. It was closer to Morse code built from air and ash. And here's the part that should bother you. This signal had a range limit of maybe 20-30 kilometers on a clear day. Your phone right now reaches literally anyone on Earth in under a second, and you've used that power today to send someone a single laughing emoji and nothing else. But smoke only solves the problem of what's visible. What happens when the message needs to cross a forest, or travel at night, or move faster than a hilltop-to-hilltop relay allows? That gap is where drums come in, and this is where the story gets stranger than most people expect. In parts of West and Central Africa, talking drums didn't just make noise, they mimicked the tonal patterns of spoken language itself. Certain African languages are tonal, meaning pitch changes the meaning of a word, and skilled drummers could replicate those pitch patterns closely enough that a trained listener miles away could reconstruct actual sentences, not just prearranged signals like danger or gathering. A message could travel village to village, drumbeat to drumbeat, faster than a runner could physically carry it on foot. That's not a warning siren. That's language, translated into rhythm, thrown across distance. You'd expect that to be the peak of the story sound traveling farther than the body can run. But it creates a new problem immediately. Drums and smoke only work between fixed points, hilltop to hilltop, village to village. What about news that has to cross an entire continent, through deserts, over mountains, through territory with no drums and no line of sight at all? That's a different kind of distance, and it required a different kind of technology. A human being, trained specifically to carry meaning in their legs. Relay running networks existed across multiple ancient societies, and the most famous, better documented one is the Inca chasqui system, where trained runners were stationed in relay posts along mountain roads, and each one sprinted a set distance before handing off a message, sometimes verbal, sometimes encoded in knotted chords called quipu, to the next runner. Estimates suggest information could move roughly 200 kilometers in a single day this way, across terrain your car would struggle with. That's not a courier delivering a letter. That's a relay race where the prize is the survival of an empire's communication system. And notice the shift that just happened. The message stopped being a static signal like smoke. and became something living, something carried inside a person's memory and breath, passed hand to hand like a flame that must not go out. Which raises the uncomfortable question underneath all of this. If the message lives inside a person's memory, how does it survive being passed along dozens, sometimes hundreds of times, without collapsing into nonsense? You've played the telephone game at a party. You know how fast a sentence rots after 6 people. So how did oral information survive intact across hundreds of kilometers and, in some cases, thousands of years? This is where most explanations quietly go soft, and where the real answer gets uncomfortable in a good way, because the trick wasn't better memory. Human memory for random information is genuinely bad, worse than most people assume. The trick was that these messages were never stored as plain information. They were stored as structure, rhythm, melody, repetition, pattern. That's the actual technology. And it's the reason the next example on this list isn't a signal system at all. It's something closer to software running on the human voice. In Aboriginal Australian cultures, certain oral traditions often referred to as songlines encode travel routes across vast stretches of the continent, sometimes hundreds of kilometers, through song. Landmarks, water sources, and directional cues are embedded into lyrics and melody tied to specific ancestral stories, so that singing the correct sequence in the correct order effectively walks you through the landscape without a single written map. Distort a random sentence and nobody notices. Distort a note in a familiar song, or skip a verse, and it's immediately, obviously wrong. The structure itself resists corruption. That's not folklore preserved out of sentimentality. That's a functioning navigation system, disguised as culture, engineered so an entire continent's worth of geography could be transmitted, generation after generation, without a single map ever being drawn. You've been thinking of a song as entertainment your whole life. Somewhere on this planet, a song was a GPS. And once you see that, the earlier layers start looking different too. The drums weren't just signals, they were rhythm doing the same job songlines did, compressing information into a form immune to slow decay. The relay runners weren't just fast, they were trained to protect structured memory the same way a songline protects a route. Every layer of this system solves the same underlying problem from a different angle. How do you make information survive a long, uncertain journey through unreliable human hands? Right when you think you've got the shape of the whole picture, fire, drum, foot, song, there's a bonus layer sitting underneath all of it that most people never connect to communication at all: trade. Archaeological evidence shows shell ornaments originating near coastlines, turning up in inland settlements, hundreds of kilometers from any ocean, moving hand to hand along trade networks long before anything we'd recognize as a marketplace existed. Goods didn't travel alone, news rode with them. A trader arriving with unfamiliar shells wasn't just delivering an object, they were the physical proof that somewhere out there, another group existed, that a route to them was walkable, that contact was possible. Every object that crossed hundreds of kilometers was itself a message: we are here, we made this, and someone worth trusting carried it to you. That reframes everything you thought you knew about ancient economies. Trade wasn't separate from communication. Trade was communication, wearing the disguise of commerce. So follow the full chain now, because this is the twist most people miss entirely. It wasn't smoke, or drums, or runners, or songlines, or trade goods that were the real technology. Those were just the containers. The actual invention, the one thing every single ancient long-distance system depended on, was structure itself. Rhythm, melody, ritual repetition, physical relay, all built specifically to survive travel through unreliable human memory without falling apart. Writing didn't invent long-distance communication. Writing just replaced structure with permanence, trading a beautiful, fragile system for a blunt, durable one. And that's the part that should sit with you a little uncomfortably after this ends. You live inside the most information-saturated moment in the species' entire history, and yet you've largely lost the skill that carried news across an entire continent for 200,000 years. The ability to hold something precisely in your memory, structured well enough that it doesn't rot on the way out of your mouth. Somewhere in your own instincts, buried under every notification and every forgotten conversation, there's still a version of you that once had to remember a route through the desert, sung correctly, or die of thirst trying to find it. You didn't lose that ability because you got weaker. You lost it because you stopped needing it the moment something else agreed to remember for you.